The sky above Velmar was dying, not falling, not burning. Dying slowly, the way an old man dies, quiet and tired, with no sound at all. The star that had given light to the Velmari people for 10,000 years was losing its heat. Scientists called it a collapse event. Normal people just called it the end. On the planet Velmar, in a small farming village near the eastern hills, an old man named Soon stood outside his home and looked up at the sky. The sun looked the same as always, bright, warm, kind. But Soon knew the truth, because his son worked at the Velmari Science Council, and his son had told him the truth in a quiet, shaking voice 3 nights ago. "Father," his son had said, "in 6 months, our star will collapse. When it happens, it will not explode. It will just stop. No heat, no light. Nothing will survive." Soon had said nothing that night. He simply held his son's hand and looked at the stars, wondering if any of them had answers. The Velmari were not a warrior people. They had no armies, no war fleets, no weapons built for killing. For over 2,000 years they had lived in peace, growing food, building homes, singing songs to their children at night. When other species looked at the galaxy map, they saw the Velmari system marked in soft green, the color for peaceful, non-threatening, low priority. That color was about to become a problem. Because when Velmar's star began to fail, and the Velmari High Council sent out a message to every spacefaring civilization they could reach, most species looked at that soft green mark on the map and thought the same thing. Not our problem. The message was simple. It was broadcast across 100 systems, translated into 40 different languages, carried by tired engineers who had not slept in days. "This is the Velmari High Council. Our sun is dying. In 180 days our planet will become uninhabitable. We have no ships capable of moving our population. We have no colony worlds. We are asking, not for weapons, not for money. We are asking for shelter. We are asking any civilization with the ability to help us survive." Silence came first. Then came the replies. And the replies were worse than silence. The Krindal Empire, a proud and powerful race of warriors, replied only once. "The weak do not deserve rescue. Adapt or vanish. This is the law of the stars." The trade union of ESSA sent back a cold response. "We regret your situation. Unfortunately, rescue operations of this scale exceed profitable return. We wish you well." The Sithrai Collective, known for their advanced technology, simply never replied at all. One by one, the answers came back the same. No, no, no. Some species did not even bother to reply. The Velmari had reached out with open hands, and the galaxy had turned its back. In the council chamber, hundreds of Velmari leaders sat in silence, their faces pale, their eyes tired. Elder Soon's son, a young councilman named Doran, stood at the front of the room, holding a small data pad with shaking hands. "There is one more," Doran said quietly. "One more species we have not tried." An older councilwoman, Elder Mira, looked at him with tired eyes. "Who?" Doran hesitated. "The humans." The room went quiet, but not the good kind of quiet. It was the quiet of fear. "The humans," Elder Mira repeated slowly, "are not known for peace, Doran. They are known for war. For centuries they have fought each other, fought outsiders, fought anything that stood in their way. Some call them the mad species. Do you understand what you are suggesting?" "I understand," Doran said. "But I also know this. Humans have never once refused a request to help another species survive. Not once. In every recorded case, when someone asks humanity for help, humanity answers. And what do they send in return?" Another councilman asked, his voice sharp. "Soldiers? Weapons? We are not looking for a war, Doran. We are looking for shelter." Doran looked down at the data pad in his hands, then back up at the council. "I do not know what they will send," he admitted. "But I know this. We have 180 days left. Every other door has closed. This may be the only door still open." The room fell silent again. Finally, Elder Mira sighed, an old, tired sound. "Send the message," she said. "May the stars forgive us if we are wrong." The message reached Earth on a quiet Tuesday morning. It arrived first at a small monitoring station in orbit, picked up by a young technician named Aria Reyes, who was drinking coffee and half asleep when the alert light on her console turned bright red. She sat up fast, spilling coffee on her uniform, and did not even notice. "Sir," she said into her radio, "I have an incoming distress signal. Unknown origin. It's a request for planetary evacuation assistance." Her supervisor, a tired man named Commander Hale, walked over and looked at the screen. His eyebrows went up. "Translate it," he said. "All of it. Now." The message played through the station speakers, translated by the ship's AI into calm, careful English. "This is the Velmari High Council. Our sun is dying. In 180 days, our planet will become uninhabitable. We have no ships capable of moving our population. We have no colony worlds. We are asking any civilization with the ability to help us survive." The room went silent. "How many people are we talking about?" Hale asked. Arya checked the data. Her face went pale. "Sir, 4 billion. 4 billion people on one planet with 180 days before the sun dies." Hale stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he picked up the radio and said the words that would begin everything. "Get me Earth Defense Command right now." Within 12 hours, the message had reached every major government on Earth. Within 24 hours, an emergency session of the United Earth Council was called. Leaders from every nation sat around one long table, looking at images of a small green-blue planet on the screen in front of them. The planet Velmar, seen through a probe that had been sent decades earlier for scientific study. A general named Marcus Webb stood at the front of the room. He was an old soldier, gray-haired with tired eyes that had seen too many wars. But when he spoke, his voice was steady and clear. 4 billion lives, he said. 180 days, no ships of their own, no colony worlds. This is not a small request. This is the largest evacuation and shelter operation in human history, and it is not even our own planet. A representative from one nation raised her hand. "General, with respect, we barely have the resources for our own colonies on Mars and the outer stations. How can we possibly save 4 billion people from another world?" Webb nodded slowly. "You're right. We cannot save 4 billion people the way you're imagining, shipping them all to Earth or building 4 billion new homes overnight. That is not possible. But that is not what they are truly asking for." He turned to the screen and pulled up a new image. Construction plans, ship designs, defense formations. "They asked for shelter," Webb said. "So we give them shelter, not evacuation, protection. We go there. We build fortified shelters on their world, deep underground and inside mountains, strong enough to survive the loss of their sun's heat, using self-sustaining power systems. We do not move 4 billion people across the galaxy. We move engineers, soldiers, and machines to their doorstep, and we build them a new world to live in, on the world they already call home." The room was silent for a moment. "That is an enormous project," someone said. "It will take resources, soldiers, engineers, ships, and there is no guarantee of safety. If we send that much of our fleet and personnel that far from Earth, we will be exposed. Other species may see this as weakness or as an opportunity." Webb's face did not change. "Then we send enough force that no one thinks of it as an opportunity." A long silence followed. Finally, the council chairwoman, an elderly woman named Elena Voss, spoke. "General Webb," she said, "if we do this, understand what you are asking. You are asking humanity to send commanders to lead the operation, builders to construct an entire underground civilization in 6 months, and enough military strength to defend it against anyone who might attack a weakened, resource-desperate world in chaos. This is not charity. This is a full deployment." "Yes, ma'am," Webb said. "That is exactly what I am asking." Voss looked around the table at the tired, uncertain faces of the world's leaders. Then she looked back at the screen, at the small green-blue planet, and at the 4 billion lives waiting somewhere out there in the dark, hoping anyone would answer. "Do we have a vote?" she asked. The vote did not take long. Back on Velmar, 172 days remained. Elder Soon stood in the same spot outside his home where he had stood many nights before, looking up at the sky. His son Doran walked out to join him, his face tired but calmer than it had been in weeks. "Father," Doran said, "we received a reply." Soon turned slowly. "From the humans?" Doran nodded. "Yes." "What did they say?" Doran hesitated, remembering the words exactly as they had been translated and read aloud in the council chamber just hours earlier. Short, simple, no conditions, no demands. They said, "Received. Help is coming." Soon blinked. "That is all? No terms? No requests in return?" "None," Doran said quietly. "Just that. Help is coming." For the first time in many nights, Soon felt something in his chest that he had almost forgotten. Hope. But even as hope rose in him, a small, worried voice in the back of his mind whispered a warning, remembering the old stories about the humans. Warriors, fighters, the mad species who never stopped fighting. "What kind of help, I wonder?" Soon said softly, almost to himself. He would not have to wait long to find out. While the Velmari waited, on Earth, the work had already begun. Inside a massive military base outside Colorado, thousands of soldiers, engineers, and pilots gathered for briefings that lasted late into the night. Ships were fueled. Cargo holds were filled with construction machines, medical supplies, food packs, and heavy equipment. Nobody complained about the long hours. Nobody asked why they were doing this for a species they had never met. A young pilot named Captain Elena Cruz sat in the briefing room, listening to General Webb explain the mission. Beside her, an engineer named Tomas Reyes leaned over and whispered, "Do you think they'll trust us? After all those stories about humans being violent?" Cruz shrugged. "Doesn't matter what they think of us right now. We just have to show up and do the work. Trust comes later." Tomas nodded slowly. "I hope you're right." General Webb finished his briefing with a simple message that would be repeated many times over the coming months. "We are not going there to prove anything. We are not going there for glory. 4 billion people are going to lose their son. Our job is simple: keep them alive. Everything else is just noise." The soldiers in the room nodded. Some of them had families of their own, some had children waiting at home. But every single one of them understood, in that quiet moment, exactly why this mission mattered. Back on Velmar, in the days before the fleet's arrival, Doran had spent many sleepless nights preparing reports for the council, trying to guess what the humans might need, what they might ask for, what conditions they might set. He had read every old record about humanity that the Velmari archives held, mostly stories from traders and travelers who had passed through human space and came back with wild tales. "They fight everything," one old record said. "They fight diseases, they fight hunger, they fight each other, and somehow, they still find time to build beautiful things. It is hard to understand such a species." Another record, written by a nervous merchant many decades earlier, said simply, "Do not anger them, but do not fear them either. If you need help and you ask honestly, they rarely say no." Doran had held on to that last line like a small light in the darkness. They rarely say no. It was the only reason he had suggested sending the message at all. Now, standing beside his father, and watching the fleet settle into orbit above their dying world, Doran allowed himself a small, cautious breath of relief. The ships had not fired. The message from General Webb had been simple and clear. Perhaps, just perhaps, the old records had been right. 6 days later, on a calm evening with a soft orange sunset painting the sky over the Velmari capital city, alarms suddenly began to ring across every major settlement on the planet. People rushed outside their homes, looking up in fear, thinking perhaps this was it. The star failing early, the end arriving sooner than predicted. Children cried, parents grabbed their families and ran toward emergency shelters that were nowhere near ready. But it was not the star. High above the planet, space itself seemed to shimmer and tear open, like water rippling around a stone. And through that tear came ships. Not one, not 10, hundreds of them, massive and silent, moving in perfect formation, filling the sky like a wall of dark metal against the orange sunset. In the council chamber, Elder Mira stood frozen at the window, staring up at the fleet with wide eyes. Doran ran into the room, breathless. Elder, look." "I see them," Mira whispered. The ships did not fire, They did not attack. They simply came closer, slowing as they approached the planet's orbit, arranging themselves in careful, deliberate patterns, like pieces on a board being placed with purpose. Elder Soon, watching from his village with his neighbors gathered around him in fear and awe, felt his heart pounding in his chest. Old warnings echoed in his mind. The mad species, the warriors, the ones who never stop fighting. And for a terrible moment he feared that Doran's decision, made in desperation, had brought not salvation, but destruction. A young child beside him tugged at his sleeve, her voice shaking. "Grandfather, are they going to hurt us?" Soon did not answer right away. He simply stared up at the endless wall of human ships filling the sky above his dying world, and he wondered, with a fear colder than the failing sun above him, exactly what kind of help humanity had truly sent. High above, inside the lead command ship, General Marcus Webb stood at the observation window, looking down at the small, frightened planet below. Behind him, rows of soldiers, engineers, and pilots stood ready, waiting for his order. He turned to his second-in-command, a sharp-eyed colonel named Dana Frost. "Open a channel to the surface," Webb said. "Let's introduce ourselves." "Yes, sir," Frost replied. "What should the message say?" Webb looked back down at the planet one more time, at the fragile, dying green world that had asked a galaxy of strangers for shelter, and had been refused by everyone except them. "Tell them," he said quietly, "that humanity has arrived. And we are not here to take. We are here to build." Down on the surface, as the message reached every home, every village, every frightened family staring up at the alien fleet above them, Elder Soon felt the fear in his chest slowly begin to loosen, just a little. The first days after the fleet's arrival were strange for everyone. Small transport shuttles began descending to the surface, landing in open fields near the capital city, under careful watch from both Velmari guards and human soldiers. The first humans to step onto Velmari soil were not doctors, as many Velmari had hoped, but soldiers in dark uniforms moving in quiet, disciplined formation, scanning the area with careful eyes. A crowd of frightened villagers gathered at a distance, whispering among themselves. "Why soldiers first?" someone asked. "We need medicine, food, shelter. Why send fighters?" Elder Mira, standing near the front of the crowd with Doran at her side, voiced the same question when General Webb himself stepped down from the lead shuttle, walking calmly toward the Velmari leaders with a small group of officers behind him. "General," Mira said carefully through a translator device, "we thank you for coming, but we do not understand. We asked for shelter. You have sent us warriors. Why?" Webb studied her for a moment, his expression calm and patient. "Elder Mira," he said, "may I ask you something first? In the last 6 days since your message went out to the galaxy, has anyone else shown interest in your world?" Mira frowned, confused by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Webb said, "has your council detected any unusual activity near your system's borders? Any unknown ships? Any strange signals?" Doran stepped forward, his face suddenly pale. There have been reports. Sensor stations near the outer edge of our system picked up unusual readings 3 days ago. We assumed it was a malfunction." Webb nodded slowly, as if he had expected this answer. "It was not a malfunction," he said. "Your world just became known to the entire galaxy as a place with 4 billion people, a dying sun, and almost no defenses. To some species, that is not a tragedy. That is an opportunity." The crowd fell silent, the fear returning to their faces. "That is why soldiers came first," Webb continued. "Because shelter means nothing if there is no one to protect it while it is being built. My builders are already unloading equipment as we speak. Construction will begin within hours, but before we dig a single tunnel, we make sure no one can take what we build away from you." Elder Mira looked at him for a long moment, her old eyes searching his face for any sign of deception. She found none. "You truly believe someone will attack us," she said quietly, "while we are still trying to survive our own sun." "I don't believe it," Webb said. "I know it. It has happened before, with other species, in other places." Desperation makes some worlds targets, not just victims. We do not intend to let that happen here. Doran, standing beside Elder Mira, felt a strange mixture of fear and gratitude rise in his chest. The humans had not come only to build. They had come prepared for exactly the kind of danger the Velmari themselves had never even considered. That night, as the human soldiers set up defense perimeters around the first construction sites, and massive drilling machines began cutting into the mountains outside the capital city, Elder Soon sat with his family, watching the strange, powerful machines work under bright floodlights in the darkness. "Grandfather," the young girl from before asked again, tugging at his sleeve, "are we safe now?" Sun watched the human soldiers standing guard at the edge of the construction site, calm and alert, and he watched the builders working through the night without rest, shaping the mountain into something that might one day hold his people safe from the dying sun above. "I don't know yet, little one," he said honestly. "But for the first time in a long while, I believe we have a chance." Far above the planet, inside the command ship, General Webb stood once again at the observation window, watching the construction lights spread slowly across the dark side of the planet, like 1,000 small stars being born on the ground. Colonel Frost walked up beside him, holding a data pad. "Sir, long-range sensors just confirmed it. Unknown fleet, moving toward this system. ETA, 6 days. Webb did not turn away from the window. "How many ships?" "Unclear yet," Frost said. "But sensor size suggests it's not a small raiding party. This could be a full assault fleet." Webb was quiet for a moment, watching the lights of hope spreading slowly across the surface below. Homes being built, tunnels being dug, a future being carved into stone for a people who had almost given up hope entirely. "Then we have 6 days to finish enough shelters to save as many lives as possible," Webb said quietly. "And 6 days to prepare a defense strong enough to make sure no one takes this world away from them." He turned to Frost, his eyes hard and steady. "Wake the bombers," he said. "Tell them their war may be starting sooner than expected." Far beyond the edge of the Velmari system, in the cold darkness between the stars, other eyes had already noticed the sudden arrival of a massive, unfamiliar fleet near a weak, resource-desperate planet. And they were already changing course. 6 days felt very short when a mountain needed to become a home. Across the Velmari capital region, the sound of machines never stopped. Day and night, giant drilling rigs cut deep into the rock, carving tunnels wide enough to hold entire towns. Bright floodlights turned the darkness into a strange, endless day. Dust filled the air, but nobody complained because every hour of work meant more lives saved when the sun finally went dark. Elder Soon stood at the edge of one construction site with his son Doran, watching human engineers move in and out of a massive tunnel entrance carved into the side of a hill that had been solid stone just 3 days earlier. "I still cannot believe it," Soon said quietly. 3 days ago this was a hill. Now it is a doorway to a city underground. Doran nodded, his eyes tired from lack of sleep, but bright with something close to hope. "Their machines are faster than anything we have ever built, faster than anything I believed was possible." A human engineer walked past them, covered in dust, carrying a heavy tool over his shoulder. He noticed the two Velmari watching and gave them a small, tired smile and a nod before continuing on his way. "They do not act like conquerors," Doran said softly. "They act like they are simply doing a job." "Perhaps that is exactly what this is to them," Soon replied. "A job. A hard one. But still just a job." Inside the main command tent near the construction site, General Marcus Webb stood over a large table covered in glowing maps and building plans. Colonel Dana Frost stood beside him along with a woman in an engineer's uniform, her name tag reading Chief Engineer Lena Park. "Report," Webb said. Park pointed to the glowing map, where dozens of tunnel systems spread out beneath the capital region like the roots of a great tree. "Shelter construction is ahead of schedule, sir. We will have primary shelters ready for 2 million people within 4 days. Full capacity for the capital region, around 30 million, within 3 weeks." "And the rest of the planet?" Webb asked. "Slower," Park admitted. "We are deploying teams to 12 other major population centers. But 4 billion people is 4 billion people, sir. Even with our best equipment, full planetary shelter capacity will take the entire 6 months we were given, working every single day without stopping. Webb nodded slowly. Then we work every single day without stopping. Frost cleared her throat. Sir, there is another matter. The unknown fleet detected 6 days ago has entered the outer edge of the system. Long-range scans now confirm ship count and type. Webb straightened. Tell me. 240 vessels, Frost said. Mixed classes, heavy cruisers, troop transports, and at least a dozen ships matching the profile of orbital bombardment platforms. The tent went quiet for a moment. That is not a raiding party, Park said quietly. That is an invasion force. Yes, Webb said, his voice calm but hard. It is. Do we know who they are? Frost asked. Webb looked at the screen, where a faint cluster of red dots marked the approaching fleet. Preliminary identification markers match the Drask Combine, a group we've had limited contact with before. They are not known for negotiation. They are known for taking what they want from worlds too weak to stop them. The Velmari have no defenses of their own, Park said. If that fleet reaches this system before we are ready, they will not reach this system unprepared, Webb said firmly. That is why the bombers are already moving into position. That is why every soldier on this base has been briefed. We build with one hand, and we prepare to fight with the other. Both happen at the same time, neither one stops for the other. Frost nodded. I'll update the defense formations. As she turned to leave, Webb called after her. Frost, make sure the Velmari Council is briefed as well. They deserve to know exactly what is coming. Yes, sir. That evening in the council chamber, Elder Mira sat across from General Webb and Colonel Frost as they explained the situation, using a large holographic display showing the approaching fleet. 240 ships, Mira repeated, her voice trembling slightly. Coming here, to take what little we have left. Yes, Webb said simply. There was no comfort in his voice, only honesty. The Drask Combine has done this before, to other struggling worlds. They wait until a species is weak, distracted, or desperate, and then they attack, taking resources, technology, sometimes even people, before anyone else can respond. And you believe you can stop them? Mira asked. I believe we can make them regret trying, Webb said. Doran, standing near the back of the chamber, stepped forward. General, if this fleet is as strong as you say, would it not be wiser to hide our people now? Move everyone into whatever shelters are ready, rather than risk a battle at all. Webb turned to him, his expression patient. If we hide and do nothing, the Drask Combine will simply take their time. They will destroy anything usable on the surface, cut off future construction, and eventually find every hiding place we have. Running does not save your people, Doran. It only delays the moment they lose everything. Then what do? Doran asked. We do not run, Webb said. We stand in the sky above this world, and we make it clear that Velmar is no longer an easy target. Mira looked at him for a long moment. You would risk your soldiers' lives so soon after arriving, for a people you barely know? Webb's expression did not change. Elder Mira, my soldiers did not come here to watch your people struggle from a safe distance. They came here to help. That does not stop the moment things become dangerous. If anything, that is exactly when it matters most. The room was silent. Finally, Mira nodded slowly. Then we trust you, General. Because we have no other choice left. You have a choice, Webb said quietly. You are choosing to trust us. That is different from having no choice at all. Over the next 2 days, the pace of construction became almost impossible to believe. Builders worked in exhausted shifts, sleeping only a few hours at a time. Massive underground chambers took shape, complete with power systems, water recycling units, and basic medical stations. Velmari workers, at first hesitant and unsure, began joining the humans in the construction efforts, learning quickly, working side by side with people who, just days earlier, they had feared as dangerous strangers. A young Velmari woman named Taya worked alongside a human soldier named Private Marcus Diaz, both of them carrying heavy support beams into a tunnel entrance. You are stronger than I expected, Taya said, slightly out of breath. Diaz laughed quietly. You get strong fast when you're carrying beams 12 hours a day. Why do you do this? Taya asked. This is not your world. These are not your people. Diaz thought about the question for a moment before answering. My grandmother used to say something. she said. A stranger is just a friend you haven't met the hard way yet. I didn't understand it when I was young. I think I understand it now. Taya smiled, a small, tired, genuine smile. That is a good way to think about it. Above them in the darkening sky, faint lights moved in careful patterns. Human ships taking up defensive positions, preparing for a battle that everyone hoped would not come, but that everyone knew probably would. Not every Velmari trusted the humans, even as the shelters rose from the ground with astonishing speed. In a smaller village on the far side of the capital region, an old farmer named Beln stood in front of a group of worried neighbors, his arms crossed, his face hard with suspicion. Think carefully, Beln said. A species with weapons that powerful arriving so quickly, building so fast. Does that not frighten you? What do they truly want from us? We have no great wealth, no rare resources. Why would any species spend so much effort on a dying world unless they wanted something in return? A younger man in the crowd shook his head. They have asked for nothing, Belin. Not resources, not land, not even our gratitude. My cousin works beside their engineers every day. He says they only speak of finishing the work and of keeping people safe. Words are easy, Beln said. Time will tell us the truth, and will. Word of Beln's doubts eventually reached Doran, who decided to visit the village himself, along with a young human liaison officer named Sergeant Priya Nair, who had been assigned to help ease tensions between the two peoples. When they arrived, Beln greeted them with polite but guarded respect. Councilman, and you must be one of the humans I have heard so much about. Sergeant Priya Nair, she said, offering a small nod instead of the aggressive gestures Beln had perhaps expected. I understand you have concerns. I do, Beln said bluntly. Tell me plainly. What does humanity gain from saving us? Nair considered the question carefully before answering. Nothing you can hold in your hands, she said. No resources, no land, no treaty in our favor. But there is something we gain that matters to us more than those things. And what is that? Beln asked, skeptical. The knowledge that when someone asked for help, and we have the power to give it, we did not look away. Nair said simply. We have learned, through hard history of our own, that a species that only helps when there is profit involved is not truly a good neighbor. We would rather be remembered as the ones who showed up, even when it cost us something. Beln studied her for a long moment, his suspicion slowly softening into something more thoughtful. That is either the wisest answer I have heard in weeks, he said, or the most convincing lie. Nair smiled faintly. Time will tell you which, Elder Beln. Until then, we will simply keep building. Doran watched the exchange quietly, and felt for the first time a strange sense of pride in the choice he had made many nights ago, sending that desperate message out into an uncaring galaxy. On the third night, the alarm sounded again. This time there was no confusion about what was happening. Every Velmari on the surface knew exactly what those alarms meant. The Drask fleet had entered the system. Elder soon gathered his family and neighbors, moving them carefully but quickly toward the nearest completed shelter entrance, following instructions given calmly by human soldiers stationed at every checkpoint. Move steadily, no running, a soldier said gently to the frightened crowd. There is room for everyone. Move steadily. Soon held the hand of the young girl from before, his neighbor's granddaughter, as they walked toward the shelter entrance. She looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. Grandfather, are the bad ships here? Not yet, little one, Soon said, trying to keep his voice steady. But the humans are ready for them. High above, inside the command ship, General Webb stood at the observation window once more, watching hundreds of small lights, the approaching Drask fleet, grow slowly larger on the long-range display. Colonel Frost stood beside him. All defense ships in position, sir. Bombers ready. Ground shelters at 70% capacity for the capital region. 70%, Webb repeated quietly. Better than I expected, given the timeline. Orders, sir? Frost asked. Webb watched the approaching fleet for a long moment. Behind him on nearby monitors he could see live feeds from the surface, Velmari families moving calmly into shelters, guided patiently by human soldiers, children being carried, elders being helped along by young volunteers, both human and Velmari working side by side. Hold position, Webb said finally. Let them come to us. Let them see exactly what waits for them here. The Drask fleet did not slow down as it approached Velmar's orbit. Their commander, a broad armored figure named Overlord Krax, stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the sensor readings with a mixture of confusion and irritation. Explain this to me again, Krax growled at his sensor officer. A human fleet, here, defending this weak little farming world. Yes, Overlord, the officer said nervously. Sensors confirm human military presence, along with significant construction activity on the surface. Krax laughed, a low, cold sound. The humans waste their strength on a dying, worthless planet. This will be easier than expected. Their presence changes nothing. We take what we came for. Overlord, human fleets have a reputation for... I know their reputation, Krax snapped. Reputation does not stop weapons fire. Move the fleet into attack formation. We will remind these humans that reputation and results are not the same thing. A junior officer, younger and less confident than the others, spoke up cautiously from the back of the bridge. Overlord, if I may, I studied human conflict records during my training. In every recorded engagement, human forces have shown a pattern of overcommitting resources when defending civilians. They do not fight like raiders looking for profit. They fight like... Like what? Krax demanded, turning sharply toward the young officer. The officer hesitated, choosing his next words carefully. Like they have already decided losing is not an option, Overlord, regardless of the cost. Krax's expression darkened for a brief moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face before his usual arrogance returned. Then they will lose everything and the cost will be theirs to bear, he said coldly. Enough talk. Move the fleet into attack formation. The Drask fleet spread out, moving into an aggressive attack pattern, weapon systems powering up across 240 ships. Aboard the human command ship, sensors picked up the enemy fleet's weapons powering up. They're moving into attack formation, Frost reported, weapons hot across their entire fleet. Webb's expression remained calm, but his eyes were sharp and focused. Send them one final message, he said. Simple, clear. Frost nodded and opened a channel. Moments later, a translated message reached the Drask flagship's bridge. This world is under the protection of Earth. Withdraw now, and no lives need to be lost today. This is your only warning. On the Drask bridge, Overlord Krax laughed loudly at the message. A warning, from a fleet defending a planet that is not even their own. He turned to his weapons officer. Answer them properly. Open fire. The first shots from the Drask fleet lit up the darkness of space, streaking toward the human defense line. Back on the human command ship, Webb watched the incoming fire on the display, his face unreadable. They made their choice, he said quietly. He turned to Frost, his voice suddenly sharp and clear, carrying the weight of command earned through years of hard experience. Engage defense formations, protect the shelters below at all costs, and Frost, sir, tell the bombers it's time. The battle that followed lit up the night sky above Velmar like a violent, terrible storm of light. Human defense ships moved with sharp, practiced precision, absorbing the first wave of Drask fire on reinforced shields while returning fire with devastating accuracy. Below on the surface, Velmari families huddled inside half-finished shelters, feeling the distant tremor of explosions far above them, staring upward through reinforced viewing ports at flashes of light streaking across the sky. Elder Soon held the young girl close as the ground trembled slightly beneath them. Are we going to be okay, grandfather? She whispered. Soon looked toward a nearby viewport where he could see distant flashes of light, human ships weaving through enemy fire, defending the sky above his dying, desperate world. I believe we are, little one, he said softly. I believe we truly are. Above them, the true strength of humanity's promise was only beginning to reveal itself, as squadrons of bombers waiting silently in the darkness beyond the main defense line finally began to move. The sky above Velmar had become a battlefield. Streaks of light crossed the darkness in every direction, human defense ships weaving between blasts of enemy fire, shields flashing bright each time a shot landed. Below, on the surface, the ground trembled softly with each distant explosion, and inside the half-finished shelters, Velmari families held each other close, listening to sounds they had never heard before and hoped never to hear again. Eldersoon sat with his back against the cold stone wall of the shelter, the young girl asleep against his shoulder despite the noise, exhausted from fear. Around him, other families sat in silence, staring upward at the reinforced ceiling above them, as if they could somehow see through solid rock to the battle raging beyond it. "How long can they hold?" a woman nearby whispered to no one in particular. No one answered. No one knew. Near the shelter's main entrance, a group of Velmari volunteers worked alongside a small team of human medics, preparing emergency supplies in case the battle above reached the ground. Taya, the young Velmari woman who had worked alongside Private Diaz during construction, stood among them, her hands shaking slightly as she organized bandages and medical kits. "You don't have to be here," a human medic named Corporal Sarah Kim said gently, noticing Taya's nervousness. "You could wait with the others." "No," Taya said firmly, steadying her hands. "Private Diaz told me humans do not run from hard work even when it is frightening. I would like to be the same." Kim smiled softly. "Diaz talks too much, but he's not wrong." Outside, the distant flashes of battle continued, but inside the shelter, surrounded by careful preparation and quiet determination, the fear in the room slowly began to feel a little less overwhelming. Aboard the human command ship, General Marcus Webb watched the battle unfold across multiple screens, his face calm despite the chaos displayed in front of him. Colonel Dana Frost stood beside him, relaying reports as they came in. "Shield integrity holding at 78% across the defense line," Frost reported. "We're taking hits, but nothing critical yet." "And their fleet?" Webb asked. "Still full strength," Frost said. "They're testing our formation, probing for weaknesses. Overlord Krax is being cautious now, sir. That junior officer's warning may have gotten through to him after all." Webb allowed himself a small, tight smile. "Then it's time to remove any doubt he has left." He turned toward a comms officer standing nearby. "Signal the bomber wing. Authorize full deployment." "Yes, sir," the officer said, relaying the order immediately. Far beyond the main defense line, in the deep darkness where they had been waiting silently, dozens of massive human bomber ships began to move. Unlike the smaller, faster defense fighters, these ships were built for one purpose only: overwhelming, decisive firepower. On the Drask flagship, Overlord Krax watched his sensor display with growing frustration as his fleet failed to break through the human defense line as quickly as he had expected. "Why do they still hold?" he snarled. 240 ships against a defense force half our size, and they still hold." His sensor officer hesitated before answering. "Overlord, human ship coordination is unusually precise. Their formations adapt faster than our targeting systems can predict." Krax slammed his fist against the console. "Increase pressure, focus fire on their center formation, break through, and the rest will collapse." "Overlord, wait," the sensor officer said suddenly, his voice tight with alarm. New contacts detected. Large vessels emerging from behind the main defense line. Krax turned sharply toward the display. "How many?" The officer's hands trembled slightly as he answered. 40, Overlord. 40 large vessels previously undetected. They were hiding in a sensor shadow behind the smaller ships. Krax stared at the new information for a long moment. A flicker of the same uncertainty the junior officer had shown earlier now crossing his own face. "What are they?" "Unknown classification," the officer admitted. "But their size, Overlord. It matches profiles associated with heavy orbital bombardment vessels." The bridge fell silent. "They were saving them," Krax said quietly, almost to himself. "This entire battle. They were only testing us." The bomber wing moved into position with terrifying precision, their massive forms cutting through the darkness like a wall of shadow against the distant stars. At the front of the formation, Captain Elena Cruz, the young pilot from Earth's briefing room days earlier, sat calmly in her cockpit, her hands steady on the controls despite the enormity of what was about to happen. Beside her in the co-pilot seat, her engineer friend Thomas Reyes checked the weapon systems one final time. "All systems green, Elena. Primary payload ready." "Copy that," Cruz said. Over the comm channel, General Webb's voice came through, calm and clear. "Bomber wing, you are cleared for engagement. Target enemy capital ships. Minimize collateral risk to our defense line. Let's finish this quickly. Copy, General, Cruz replied. She glanced briefly at a small photo clipped near her control panel. A picture of her younger sister, back on Earth, smiling brightly. She took a slow breath, then spoke into the comm channel to her squadron. All right, everyone, let's show them why nobody underestimates a bomber wing. Weapons free. The bomber wing surged forward, breaking through the human defense line and driving straight toward the heart of the Drask fleet. What followed was unlike anything the Drask fleet had ever encountered. The bombers did not scatter fire wildly. Each strike was precise, targeted, devastating. Enemy cruisers that had seemed unstoppable moments earlier were suddenly crippled, their weapons systems disabled, their shields collapsing under focused, overwhelming firepower. On the Drask flagship, alarms blared across every console as ship after ship reported critical damage. Overlord, the Vren has lost primary shields. The Dakath is reporting hull breaches on 3 decks. The Salar has stopped responding entirely. Krax stared at the display in stunned disbelief as one by one his fleet's most powerful vessels were reduced to drifting wrecks or forced into retreat. This is not possible, he muttered. A defensive force. They said this was only a defensive force. Overlord, his sensor officer said carefully. Perhaps they never intended for us to see everything they had, until it was too late to matter. Krax's jaw tightened. For the first time since arriving in the system, real fear crept into his voice. Signal a full retreat. All ships fall back beyond the system border immediately. Overlord, if we retreat now, we lose everything we invested in this campaign. If we do not retreat now, Krax snapped, we lose everything, including our lives. Signal the retreat. Now. Aboard the human command ship, Frost watched the Drask fleet's sudden chaotic retreat with quiet satisfaction. Sir, enemy fleet is breaking formation. They're pulling back, fast. Webb nodded slowly, watching the display without any visible sign of celebration. Order the bombers to hold position. Let them retreat. Do not pursue beyond the system border. Frost glanced at him, slightly surprised. Sir, we have the advantage now. We could press further, ensure they never return. We could, Webb agreed. But our mission was never to destroy the Drask Combine, Frost. Our mission was to protect Velmar. They are retreating. That objective is achieved. Chasing them further risks more lives, human and otherwise, for a victory we do not need. Frost considered this for a moment, then nodded, understanding settling over her features. Understood, sir. Holding position. Below, on the surface of Velmar, the sound of distant explosions slowly faded, replaced first by an eerie silence, and then gradually by the quiet, disbelieving sound of people beginning to realize that the battle was truly over. Inside the shelter, Elder Soon felt the young girl beside him stir awake as the tremors finally stopped. Grandfather, she whispered, rubbing her eyes. Is it over? Soon listened carefully to the silence outside, a silence that felt different now. Not the tense, frightened silence from before, but something calmer, something almost peaceful. I believe it is, little one, he said softly, allowing himself, for the first time in many long days, a genuine smile. Slowly, cautiously, families began emerging from the shelters across the capital region, looking up at a sky now empty of Drask ships, dotted instead with the familiar, steady lights of human vessels holding careful formation above them. Doran found his father among the crowd, embracing him tightly. It's over, Doran said, his voice thick with emotion. They did it. They actually did it. Soon placed a hand on his son's shoulder, looking up at the human ships above with a newfound sense of awe and gratitude. You did it too, Doran. Your decision to send that message, it saved us. The victory had not come without cost. Near one of the smaller shelter sites, medical teams worked carefully to treat injured human soldiers who had been brought down from damaged ships during the battle. Corporal Sarah Kim moved quickly between patients, her uniform stained but her hands steady, while Taya and several other Velmari volunteers assisted wherever they could, fetching supplies and comforting frightened patients who did not speak their language, but understood kindness all the same. One young soldier, his arm bandaged tightly, looked up at Taya as she brought him water. Thank you, he said weakly. Thank you. Taya replied softly, for coming so far, to help people you had never even met. 3 human ships had been lost in the battle. 12 soldiers would not be going home. When General Webb received the final casualty report late that night, he read it in complete silence, his expression unreadable, before setting it down carefully on his desk. 12, he said quietly to Frost, who stood nearby. 12 families back home who will receive news tonight that changes everything for them. Sir, Frost said gently. They knew the risk when they volunteered for this mission. Knowing the risk, Webb said, does not make the cost any smaller. He was quiet for a long moment. Make sure their names are remembered properly, Frost, not just as numbers in a report, as people who chose to come here and gave everything for a world that was not their own. Yes, sir, Frost said quietly. Webb looked out the window one final time before turning back to his work, carrying the weight of that cost alongside the relief of victory, the way any good commander must learn to carry both at once. Later that night, in the council chamber, Elder Mira stood before General Webb and Colonel Frost, her expression a complex mixture of relief, gratitude, and quiet astonishment. General, she said, I do not know how to properly express our gratitude. You have saved our world twice in less than a week, once from the loneliness of a dying star, and once from those who would have taken advantage of our weakness. Webb inclined his head respectfully. Elder Mira, no thanks are necessary. This is what we came to do. Yet still, Mira continued, many of us feared you at first. We believed the stories about humanity being a violent, warlike species, unable to help without seeking something in return. Webb was quiet for a moment before responding. Elder Mira, we are not a perfect people. Our history has violence in it, more than we are proud of. But we have also learned, through hard experience, what it feels like to be small and afraid, facing something far larger than ourselves. We remember what it felt like when others helped us long ago, and we remember what it felt like on the rare occasions when no one did. And that memory is why you came, Mira said quietly. That memory is why we came, Webb confirmed, and it is why we will stay until every shelter is finished and your people are truly safe. Doran, standing near the back of the chamber, listened closely to every word, feeling the weight of Webb's promise settle deeply into his heart. He thought of the villagers who had doubted, like old Beln, and of Sergeant Nayer's quiet answer about neighbors and honesty. He understood now, more clearly than ever, that humanity's help had never been about profit or power. It had simply been about showing up, exactly when it mattered most. Far above the planet, as repairs began on damaged human ships and the bomber wing slowly returned to formation, Captain Elena Cruz sat quietly in her cockpit, finally allowing herself to relax after the intense engagement. Tomas Reyes glanced over at her, a tired but genuine smile on his face. We did good today, Elena. Cruz nodded slowly, looking down at the planet below, where lights were beginning to reappear across the surface as people cautiously returned to their homes and construction sites. Yeah, she said softly. I think we did. She thought about her sister back on Earth, about the countless families sleeping safely tonight because of decisions made by people she would likely never meet. For a brief, quiet moment, the vast distance between her home and this strange, distant world did not feel so large after all. But even as celebration and relief spread across Velmar that night, General Webb remained standing at the observation window long after the council meeting ended, watching the stars in careful, thoughtful silence. Colonel Frost approached quietly. Sir, something on your mind? Webb did not turn immediately. The Drask Combine retreated tonight, Frost, but species like Cracks do not forget defeat easily. They remember it. And sometimes they return with allies, seeking revenge rather than opportunity. Frost's expression grew serious. You think this isn't truly over? I think, Webb said slowly, that tonight we won a battle. But the true test of what we are building here, a lasting shelter, a lasting peace, that test has not yet even begun. He turned finally to look at Frost, his eyes steady and resolute. Increase long-range sensor coverage. Begin preparing contingency plans in case tonight was simply the first move in something much larger. Frost nodded firmly. Yes, sir. As Webb turned back toward the window, looking down once more at the fragile, hopeful light spreading slowly across the dark surface of Velmar, he allowed himself, just for a moment, a small measure of quiet satisfaction. 4 billion people had been given a chance tonight that the rest of the galaxy had refused to give them. Whatever came next, humanity would be ready. 3 months passed, and the underground city beneath the Velmari capital had grown into something no one could have imagined on the night the first human ships arrived. What had once been simple tunnels carved in desperation were now wide, lit chambers filled with homes, schools, and gardens grown under artificial light. Children ran through corridors that had been solid rock only weeks before, laughing in a way that had felt impossible during the darkest days of fear and uncertainty. Above them, on the surface, the dying sun continued its slow fade, but below, in the safety of stone and steel, life had found a way to continue. Elder soon walked through one of the main corridors with his son Doran, both men older now, not in years, but in the quiet, steady way that hard experience changes a person. It is strange, Soon said, looking around at the busy corridor filled with both Velmari and human workers, laughing together, sharing food at small tables set along the walls. A few months ago, this tunnel was only dust and machines. Now it feels like home. Because it is home, Doran said. Not the home we expected, but home still. They passed a small garden area, where a group of children, both human and Velmari, sat together, listening to a story being read aloud by a human teacher, her voice carrying gently through the corridor. Among the human children were sons and daughters of soldiers and engineers who had, in time, decided to bring their families to Velmar, choosing to stay and help rebuild, rather than simply complete their mission and leave. I never imagined this, Soon admitted quietly. Human children growing up beside ours in a shelter built beneath a dying star. Neither did I, Doran said. But perhaps that is what real help looks like, Father, not simply solving a problem and leaving, but choosing to stay and build something lasting together. Near the garden, Taya sat on a low stone bench sorting through a basket of freshly grown vegetables, part of the small farming project she had helped start inside the shelter 3 months earlier. Private Marcus Diaz walked over, wiping dust from his hands after finishing a maintenance shift on one of the water systems. Still growing things, I see, Diaz said, sitting down beside her. Someone has to prove that stone and steel can still hold life, Taya said, smiling as she held up a small, round vegetable proudly. 3 months ago, I did not believe anything could grow down here. Now look. Diaz picked one up, examining it with interest. You've gotten better at this than half our own agricultural specialists. I had good teachers, Taya said, though I admit, some of your earth farming methods make very little sense to me. Diaz laughed. Trust me, they make very little sense to us too, sometimes. They sat together in comfortable silence for a moment, watching children play nearby before Taya spoke again, her voice softer, more thoughtful. Marcus, she said, do you think you will stay here? Truly stay, I mean. Not simply until your mission ends. Diaz considered the question seriously. My family back on Earth asks me the same thing every time we talk. I used to think this was temporary. A job, like my grandmother's saying goes. But now... He looked around at the garden, at the underground city that had grown from nothing but desperate hope and hard work. Now I think some places become home, even when you didn't plan for that to happen. Taya smiled, returning to her sorting. Good, she said simply, because this garden will need someone stubborn enough to keep it growing for a very long time. In the main command center, now converted into a permanent joint operations building shared by both Velmari and human administrators, General Marcus Webb reviewed the latest construction reports with Chief Engineer Lena Park. Primary shelter network is now at 94% completion across all 12 major population centers, Park reported. At this rate, full planetary coverage will be complete a full 3 weeks ahead of the original 6-month deadline. Webb nodded, allowing himself a small, satisfied smile. Good work, Park, truly. It wasn't just us, sir, Park said. The Velmari workforce adapted faster than any species I've worked with before. Half of our senior construction leads now are Velmari engineers who started as untrained volunteers 3 months ago. Colonel Dana Frost entered the room holding a data pad, her expression harder to read than usual. "Sir," she said, "long-range sensors picked up something you'll want to see." Webb's expression shifted immediately to focus. "Go ahead." Frost placed the data pad on the table, displaying a faint, distant signal pattern. "It's a transmission, originating from deep in Drask territory. Encrypted, but our analysts managed to identify the signal type. It's consistent with what the Drask Combine uses for high-level diplomatic communication." "Meaning?" Webb asked. "Meaning Krax didn't just retreat quietly after his defeat here," Frost said. "He's been talking to someone important." Webb was quiet for a moment, considering this. "Do we know who?" "Not yet," Frost admitted, but the signal was directed toward Krindal space. Park's eyes widened slightly. "The Krindal Empire? The same empire that refused the Velmari's original distress call?" "The same," Frost confirmed. Webb crossed his arms, staring thoughtfully at the display. "Krax suffered an embarrassing defeat here. If he's reaching out to the Krindal, it isn't to ask for sympathy. He's looking for allies, or at the very least looking to warn others about what happened here, twisting the story to serve his own purposes." "Should we be worried?" Park asked. "We should be prepared," Webb said. "There's a difference. Worry accomplishes nothing. Preparation does." He turned to Frost. "Keep monitoring that signal. If anything changes, I want to know immediately." "Yes, sir," Frost said. As she turned to leave, Webb added quietly, "And Frost, begin drafting a formal request to Earth Command. If the political situation in this region is more complicated than we initially believed, we may need to consider a longer-term diplomatic and defensive presence here, not just a temporary rescue mission." Frost paused at the door, glancing back at him. "You think this could become permanent, sir?" Webb looked out the window at the surface above, where sunlight still touched fields being carefully harvested by both human and Velmari hands, preparing food supplies for the underground city below. "I think," Webb said slowly, "that some promises, once made, are not meant to have an ending date." That evening, the Velmari Council called a special gathering, not in the formal chamber, but outside, in an open field near the largest shelter entrance, where hundreds of Velmari and humans gathered together beneath the fading light of the dying sun. Elder Mira stood before the crowd, her voice carrying clearly across the quiet evening air. 3 months ago," she began, "our people faced an ending. Our star was dying, our neighbors in the galaxy turned away from us, and fear had become the only thing many of us truly believed in." She paused, looking out at the mixed crowd of Velmari and human faces watching her closely. Then a message went out into the darkness sent by a young councilman who refused to give up hope even when hope seemed foolish. She glanced toward Doran, who stood quietly near the front of the crowd, looking slightly embarrassed by the attention. And that message was answered, not by the powerful, not by the wealthy, but by a species we once feared, who chose instead to become our protectors, our builders, and in time, our friends. Elder Soon, standing beside his son, felt a swell of quiet pride rise in his chest as he listened. "Tonight," Mira continued, "as the sky above us continues its slow, quiet farewell, I do not see an ending anymore. I see a beginning. A city built beneath the stone, filled with laughter, with children growing up together, with hope rebuilt from nothing but the courage of strangers who chose to become neighbors." She turned toward General Webb, who stood respectfully near the edge of the gathering. "General Webb," Mira said, "on behalf of the Velmari people, we do not simply thank you for saving us. We invite you, and all of humanity, to remain among us. Not as guests, not as saviors standing apart from our people, but as equals, building a shared future beneath these stars. However long that future may be." Webb stepped forward, his expression serious but warm. "Elder Mira," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the gathered crowd, "humanity did not come here expecting gratitude, or partnership, or friendship. We came simply because you asked, and because we could answer. But I would be lying if I said we did not find something unexpected here, something worth protecting far beyond the original mission." He looked around at the mixed crowd, at human soldiers standing beside Velmari farmers, at children of both species playing together near the shelter entrance, laughing without any understanding of the fear and uncertainty that had once filled this same ground. "We accept," Webb said simply. "Gladly." The crowd erupted into quiet, emotional applause, human and Velmari voices mixing together in a moment that, 3 months earlier, no one could have possibly imagined. Later that night, as the celebration slowly quieted and people began returning to their homes both above and below the surface, Doran found himself standing alone near the shelter entrance, looking up at the darkening sky, now filled with familiar human ships holding steady, peaceful formation above his world. "Councilman Doran?" He turned to find Sergeant Priya Nair approaching, the same human liaison officer who had visited Old Belm's village months earlier. "Sergeant," Doran said, offering a tired but genuine smile. "I owe you thanks, I think. Your conversation with Elder Beln helped ease many fears in that village." Nair smiled. "Beln still doesn't fully trust us, you know." Doran laughed softly. "Beln does not fully trust anyone. That is simply who he is. But even he has begun sending his grandchildren to the joint schools now. That, I believe, says more than words ever could." Nair nodded, looking up at the sky alongside him. "I actually saw him yesterday at the school. He didn't say much, just watched his grandchildren reading with the human teacher for almost an hour, without saying a single word." "And when he left?" Doran asked, curious. "He nodded at me," Nair said, smiling faintly. "Just once. No words. But after 3 months of nothing but suspicion, I'll take a nod." Doran chuckled quietly. From Beln, that nod is practically a written treaty of friendship. Nair smiled, then grew a little more thoughtful. "Can I ask you something, Doran? Honestly?" "Of course." "Do you regret it?" she asked, sending that message not knowing what would answer. Doran considered the question carefully, looking out at the underground city glowing softly beneath the surface, at the human and Velmari families walking together toward their homes, at the quiet, hard-won peace that had grown from nothing but a desperate hope sent into an uncaring galaxy. "No," he said finally. "Not for a single moment. We asked for shelter, not knowing what we would receive in return. What we received was far greater than shelter alone." He turned to look at her directly. "We received neighbors, Sergeant. True neighbors, who chose to stay, even when staying was hard." Nair smiled warmly. "For what it's worth, Doran, I don't think humanity regrets it either." Far above the planet, inside the command ship, General Webb stood once more at the observation window, watching the peaceful lights of the underground city glow softly through the darkness below. Colonel Frost approached quietly, standing beside him in comfortable silence for a long moment before speaking. "Sir, Earth Command responded to your request," she said. "They've approved a long-term diplomatic and defensive presence here. Full colonial support status pending final review." Webb nodded slowly, unsurprised but clearly relieved. "Good. That will help, whatever comes next from Krax and his new friends." "Do you think the Krindal will actually get involved?" Frost asked. "I don't know," Webb admitted honestly. "But I know this. Whatever comes, we will not be leaving. Not now. Not after everything these people have built, and everything we've built alongside them." Frost was quiet for a moment before speaking again. "Sir, can I ask you something personal?" "Go ahead." "Do you think other species out there are watching what happened here? Watching how we responded?" Webb considered the question, looking out at the vast darkness of space surrounding the small, fragile, hopeful world below them. "I think," he said slowly, "that word travels fast in a galaxy full of frightened, desperate worlds looking for any sign of hope. I think somewhere out there, right now, other councils, other species, facing their own impossible crises, are quietly wondering if humanity might answer their call too, the same way we answered Velmar's." "And if they do call?" Frost asked. Webb turned to her, his expression steady and certain, carrying the quiet weight of a promise made not just to one world, but to an entire philosophy of what humanity had chosen to become among the stars. "Then we answer," he said simply, "the same way we always will." Down on the surface, as the last lights of the celebration faded, and the underground city settled into peaceful nighttime quiet. Elder Soon stood once more outside near his home, looking up at the dying sun's final light fading beyond the horizon, and at the steady, familiar lights of human ships holding careful watch in the darkening sky above. The young girl, no longer quite so young, no longer quite so frightened, stood beside him, holding his hand. "Grandfather," she said softly, "will we be okay now?" Truly, Sun looked down at her, then back up at the sky, at the dying star that had once threatened to end everything his people had ever known, and at the steady, patient lights of the strangers who had chosen to become family. "Yes, little one," he said, his voice filled with quiet, hard-earned certainty. "We asked the galaxy for shelter, expecting only walls and roofs to keep us safe." He smiled softly, watching the peaceful light spread across the darkening sky. "Instead, the stars sent us neighbors, and that, I have learned, is a far greater gift than shelter alone could ever be. Above them, scattered quietly across 100 distant systems, other desperate messages were already being prepared by other frightened species, other dying worlds, other councils facing impossible choices in the face of an uncaring galaxy. And somewhere, deep within Earth's growing network of listening stations, monitoring the vast darkness of space for exactly these kinds of desperate calls, humanity waited, ready once again to answer.